I stood in the middle of our living room, my hands trembling slightly as I watched my husband wave my credit cards in the air like trophies. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the marble floors gleam, but all I could focus on was the cruel smile spreading across Gregory's face. "I've cancelled all your cards," he announced, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "You're so broke now, and you'll have to ask me even for tampon money." His laughter echoed off the high ceilings of our home, the same home I'd spent 3 years making perfect for him. Each word felt like a slap, but I forced myself to stay still, to keep breathing, to not give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. From the leather couch that cost more than most people's cars, Diane, my mother-in-law, looked up from her magazine with that smirk I'd come to know so well. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against the glossy pages as she added, "Hunger makes women behave fast." The casualness of her cruelty shouldn't have surprised me anymore, but somehow it still did. This woman had lived in our home for 6 months, eating food I prepared, sleeping in the guest room I'd carefully decorated, and she spoke about starving me like she was discussing the weather. I opened my mouth to respond, to ask what I'd done to deserve this. But Gregory cut me off. "Don't even start with your questions, Clara. I'm done with your attitude, done with your disrespect." He tucked my cards into his wallet with deliberate slowness, making sure I watched each one disappear. "Maybe now you'll learn your place." My place. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. This morning had started like any other. I'd woken up at 6, made coffee the way Gregory liked it, dark roast, 2 sugars, splash of cream. I'd prepared his breakfast, ironed his shirt, made sure everything was perfect because that's what I'd been doing for 3 years. Being perfect, being quiet, being small. The only difference was yesterday afternoon. We'd been sitting at this very dining table when Gregory mentioned investing another $500,000 into a new property development on the east side of town. I'd simply asked, not demanded, not argued, just asked, if he'd had the numbers reviewed by his accountant. The property market had been unstable lately, and the area he mentioned had been flagged in several financial reports I'd read online. I used to be an accountant, a good one. Before Gregory, before this life, I'd worked at Rodriguez & Associates Financial Consulting, handling portfolios worth millions. I understood risk assessment, market analysis, investment strategies, but I'd given all that up when Gregory asked me to marry him, when he'd said he wanted to take care of me, that I'd never have to worry about money again. Take care of me. The irony wasn't lost on me now as I stood there, essentially being told I was cut off from survival. "Gregory," I managed to keep my voice steady, "I wasn't being disrespectful. I was just concerned about what?" He stepped closer, and I could smell the expensive cologne I'd given him for his birthday last month. "About my business decisions? You think because you used to push papers around an office that you know more than me? I built this company from my father's small construction business into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. What have you done?" What have I done? I'd given up a career I loved. I'd walked away from a partnership track at one of the most respected financial consulting firms in the state. I'd spent 3 years managing every aspect of our home, our social calendar, his mother's endless needs. But none of that counted because none of it made money in a way he could brag about to his business associates. Diane stood up, smoothing down her designer dress, the one I'd helped her pick out last week, using the household credit card that apparently no longer existed. "Darling, this is what happens when men marry beneath them. These girls who come from nothing, they never understand that questioning your husband's authority is the same as questioning his manhood." I'd come from nothing. That much was true. I'd worked 2 jobs through college, graduated with honors, built my career from the ground up with nothing but my brain and my determination. Gregory had inherited his father's company and the connections that came with it. But somehow, in his mind, and his mother's, my self-made success was worth less than his inherited privilege. "I need access to money for groceries," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "For household expenses, for—" "You should have thought about that before opening your mouth yesterday." Gregory checked his watch, the Rolex I'd given him for our 2nd anniversary. "I have a meeting. You figure out how to manage. Maybe call one of those friends you used to have and ask them for help. Oh wait, you don't have friends anymore, do you? You gave all that up to be my wife." The words were designed to hurt, and they did. When I'd left my job, I'd slowly lost touch with my colleagues. When Gregory complained about my college friends being too loud or too opinionated, I'd stopped inviting them over. When Diane had moved in and taken over my space, my routine, my life, I'd withdrawn even further. He was right. I'd become isolated, and I'd let it happen. Diane picked up her purse, preparing to go out for her daily shopping trip, a trip that would be funded by Gregory's cards, of course. A wife who can't support her husband's decisions doesn't deserve to be supported herself. It's quite simple, really. I watched them both. These two people who were supposed to be my family, and felt something shift inside me. Not breaking. I'd been bending and bending for so long that breaking almost seemed impossible. But shifting. Like a door I'd forgotten existed suddenly remembered it had hinges. Gregory's phone rang, the sharp sound cutting through the tension in the room. He glanced at the screen and I saw his eyebrows furrow slightly. "First National Bank," he muttered, then looked at me with suspicion. "Did you try to use one of the cards? Because they're cancelled, Clara. Completely cancelled." I said nothing. I hadn't touched a credit card in hours. I'd barely moved from this spot since he'd started his performance. He answered the call with his business voice, the one he used to impress clients. "Gregory Bennett speaking." I watched his face as he listened to whoever was on the other end, watched as confusion flickered across his features, then disbelief, then something that looked almost like fear. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" His voice had lost its confidence. There must be some mistake. Diane had frozen halfway to the door, her predatory instincts sensing a shift in the power dynamic she'd so carefully cultivated. "That's impossible," Gregory said into the phone, his hand gripping the device so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I don't understand. Can you—" Yes, I'm listening." The colour was draining from his face, actually draining like someone had pulled a plug and all his arrogance was flowing out through his expensive Italian shoes. When he finally hung up, he just stood there, staring at the phone like it had betrayed him. "What is it?" Diane's voice had lost its smug edge, replaced by something sharp and nervous. Gregory looked up at me, really looked at me for the first time in months, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. He was scared. "Clara," he said slowly, "what did you do?" I didn't answer Gregory's question immediately. Instead, I walked slowly to the armchair near the window and sat down, crossing my legs with a calmness I didn't entirely feel but was determined to project. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face neutral, my breathing steady. "What did the bank say?" I asked, my voice quiet but clear. Gregory's jaw clenched. "Don't play games with me. The banker said there's been a large transaction involving our—" He stopped himself, seeming to realize something. "Involving accounts connected to this address. They were calling to verify some details." Diane rushed over to him, her heels clicking frantically against the marble. "What kind of transaction? How much money are we talking about?" "They wouldn't give specifics over the phone?" Gregory said, still staring at me like I'd suddenly become a stranger. "They want me to come in. They mentioned something about investment returns and LLC transfers." His eyes narrowed. "You've been hiding money from me." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "No, Gregory, I haven't been hiding anything. I've been protecting myself." The words hung there, simple and true. Diane's face twisted with rage, but before she could launch into whatever vicious speech she was preparing, I held up my hand. "Let me tell you a story," I said. "About a girl who worked extremely hard for everything she ever had." Gregory started to interrupt, but something in my expression must have stopped him. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't apologizing, wasn't shrinking, wasn't trying to make myself smaller to fit into the space he'd decided I should occupy. I thought back to 4 years ago, when I was still myself, still Clara Morrison, senior accountant at Rodriguez & Associates Financial Consulting. I'd been 24 when Thomas Rodriguez hired me fresh out of graduate school, impressed by my thesis on risk assessment in volatile markets. Most firms wanted me to start at the bottom, filing papers and making coffee, but Thomas saw something in me. "You have an eye for patterns," he'd told me during my interview. "Most people look at numbers and see just numbers. You look at them and see stories, see connections, see what's missing." He was right. I could look at a financial report and spot discrepancies that others missed. I could see when numbers were too perfect, too clean, which often meant someone was hiding something. I could predict market shifts by paying attention to small indicators that bigger firms dismissed as irrelevant. By the time I was 26, I was handling portfolios for clients worth tens of millions. Thomas had started talking about partnership, about building my own client list, about a future where my name would be on the door alongside his. Then I met Gregory at a charity fundraiser. He was charming that night, attentive, interested in what I did. He asked smart questions about my work, seemed genuinely impressed by my success. When he called the next day to ask me to dinner, I felt like maybe I could have it all: a brilliant career and a relationship with someone who respected my intelligence. For the first 6 months, it was wonderful. Gregory took me to nice restaurants, introduced me to his friends, showed me off at business events. He'd wrap his arm around my waist and tell people, "This is Clara. She's brilliant with numbers, handles millions in investments." He seemed proud of me. Then he proposed. We were at his family's lake house, just the two of us, and he got down on one knee with a ring that must have cost a fortune. But before I could say yes, he added something that should have been a warning. "I want to take care of you, Clara. Really take care of you. I want you home, building our life. Not working 70-hour weeks for other people. You've proved yourself already. Now let me prove myself to you by giving you a life where you never have to worry about money again." He made it sound romantic, like he was rescuing me from something difficult instead of asking me to give up something I loved. And I was tired. Tired of the long hours. Tired of always having to prove myself twice as hard because I was young and female in a male-dominated field. The idea of being taken care of being someone's priority, it sounded like peace. I was so stupid. No, that wasn't fair to myself. I wasn't stupid. I was hopeful. I wanted to believe that love meant partnership, that stepping back from my career would be temporary, that Gregory truly valued me beyond what I could contribute financially. Thomas had tried to warn me. The day I gave my notice, he'd called me into his office and closed the door. "Clara, I'm going to say something, and I need you to really hear me," he'd said, his expression serious. "Keep your accounts separate. Keep your investments in your own name. Keep your professional licenses current. Don't give anyone, no matter how much you love them, complete control over your financial survival." I'd laughed it off then, assured him Gregory wasn't like that we were partners. But Thomas had pressed a business card into my hand anyway. "Just in case," he'd said. "My door is always open if you need advice. Any kind of advice." I'd tucked that card away, thinking I'd never need it. The first year of marriage was good. Gregory was attentive, we travelled, he consulted me on business decisions. I managed our home, planned dinners for his clients, used the skills I'd developed in my career to help him organise his company's financial records. I felt useful, valued. The second year, things started to shift. Small comments about how I spent my days, questions about why the house wasn't cleaner when he came home, why dinner wasn't ready exactly when he wanted it. Suggestions that maybe I didn't understand business as well as I thought I did, since I'd only worked for a consulting firm, not run a company myself. Then Diane got sick. Minor surgery, she'd said, and she needed somewhere to recover. Just a few weeks, she'd promised. That was 6 months ago. With Diane in the house, everything changed faster. She'd whisper things to Gregory when she thought I couldn't hear. "She's gotten lazy without a job. She spends your money like it grows on trees. A real wife would be more grateful. You could have married the Patterson girl, you know. Her father owns half the commercial real estate downtown." Gregory started pulling away, started treating me like an employee he was disappointed in rather than a wife he loved. He stopped asking my opinion on anything. He started making unilateral decisions about our life, our money, our future. And I started to realize that Thomas had been right. 6 months ago, when I saw how bad things were getting, I dug through my old work bag and found that business card. My hands had shaken as I dialed the number. "Thomas Rodriguez. Thomas, it's Clara. Clara Bennett. My voice had cracked. "I think I need that advice now." We'd met for coffee the next day while Gregory was at work and Diane was at her book club. I'd told Thomas everything, and he'd listened without judgment, without saying, "I told you so," even though he had every right to. "The good news," he'd said finally, "is that you were smart enough to keep one account separate. The money you saved before the marriage is yours, legally and completely." I looked at Gregory now, standing in our living room, demanding answers. "What did you do, Clara?" he asked again. I smiled. "I remembered who I was before I became your wife." Gregory's face flushed red. "Stop talking in riddles and tell me what's going on." "Sit down," I said calmly. "Both of you." Diane let out a sharp laugh. "You don't give orders in this house, girl. You're nothing here. You have no money, no job, no—" "Sit down," I repeated. And something in my tone must have surprised them both because Gregory actually moved toward the couch. Diane followed, though her expression was murderous. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured lawn, the fountain Gregory had insisted on installing last year, the expensive cars in the driveway, all symbols of wealth, of success, of power. But symbols were just that, symbols. Real power was something else entirely. When I left Rodriguez & Associates 3 years ago, I had about $200,000 in savings and investments, I began. I'd been working since I was 16, saving every penny I could. I put myself through college, through graduate school, built my career from nothing. That money was mine, earned by my own work. And when we got married, Gregory, you insisted on a prenuptial agreement. To protect my business, Gregory snapped, which was the smart thing to do. It was, I agreed. And that prenup very clearly stated that any assets either of us brought into the marriage would remain separate property. Your business stayed yours. My savings stayed mine. Diane leaned forward. $200,000? Is that what this is about? Honey, Gregory makes that in a quarter. That's nothing. You're right, I said. 200,000 was nothing compared to what Gregory was making, but it was something to me. It was my safety net, my emergency fund, my proof that I'd built something on my own. I turned to face them. So I kept that account active, and every month, when Gregory gave me money for personal expenses, money he said was mine to spend however I wanted, I didn't spend all of it. I saved some, just a little at a time. $50 here, $100 there. Over 3 years, I saved about $15,000 more. Gregory waved his hand dismissively. So you have $215,000. That's still nothing. That doesn't explain why the bank called about large transactions. I'm getting to that, I said. 6 months ago, when your mother moved in and things started changing between us, I got worried. I started paying closer attention to your business deals, reading the financial reports you left lying around, listening when you talked on the phone with your partners. You were spying on me. Gregory's voice rose. I was protecting myself, I corrected. And one day, I heard you on the phone talking about a new investment opportunity, the Riverside Commercial Development Project. 20 acres of undeveloped land on the east side, near where the new highway extension was being planned. You were excited about it, said it was going to triple in value once the highway was approved. I watched recognition dawn on Gregory's face. I did my research, I continued. I looked at the plans, the zoning reports, the traffic studies, and I realized you were right. It was an excellent investment, the kind of opportunity I would have recommended to my clients back when I was working. Diane's eyes narrowed. What did you do? I called Thomas Rodriguez, my former boss. I asked him if he could help me understand how to make an investment without it being in my name directly. He explained LLCs, limited liability companies, how someone could set one up, use it to make investments, keep their identity private. Gregory stood up abruptly. You didn't. I did, I said simply. Thomas helped me establish an LLC called Morrison Holdings. Morrison was my maiden name, so it was legitimate. I used my savings, my separate property from before the marriage, and I invested in the Riverside project. I bought in 2 months before you did, Gregory, when the price per acre was lower. I secured a 30% stake in the development. The silence in the room was deafening. That's impossible, Gregory finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. That project was invitation only. You couldn't have just... Thomas Rodriguez still has connections, I said. He made some calls. Vouched for Morrison Holdings as a serious investor with liquid capital. They were happy to take my money. Diane's face had gone pale. How much are we talking about? The project just sold, I said. The highway was approved last month, and a major retail developer bought the entire property. Everyone who invested made a profit. Your 30% stake, Gregory, netted you about $800,000. Congratulations. And you? His voice was barely a whisper. My 30% stake, which was actually slightly larger than yours because I bought in earlier, netted me just over $2 million. The bank called because the wire transfer just cleared into my account this morning. Gregory sank back onto the couch like someone had cut his strings. Diane's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. $2 million, Gregory repeated. You have $2 million. I do, I confirmed. In an account that's solely in my name, funded by investments I made with my separate property. According to the prenuptial agreement you insisted on, it's completely and legally mine. Diane found her voice, shrill and sharp. That's his money. You used information from his business, his connections, I used publicly available information about a real estate development, I interrupted. The same information anyone could have accessed. I made my own investment decision with my own money. If anything, Gregory used information he got from other people in his business network. We both saw an opportunity and took it. Gregory's hands were shaking. This is why you weren't upset yesterday when I questioned the investment. You already knew it was going to pay off because you were already in it. Yes, I admitted. And when you got angry at me for simply asking if you'd had your accountant review the numbers, when you decided to punish me by cutting off all my access to money, I realized something important. What? Gregory asked. That you never really wanted a partner, I said. You wanted someone you could control, someone who would depend on you completely, who would never question you, who would be grateful for whatever scraps of dignity you decided to allow her. Diane stood up, her face twisted with rage. You ungrateful little snake. After everything this family has done for you, after we welcomed you into our home, your home. I turned to face her directly. Diane, you've been living in my home for 6 months, in a guest room I decorated, eating food I prepared, having your laundry done by the housekeeper I hired and managed. You've contributed exactly nothing except poison in your son's ear. How dare you speak to me that way? How dare you? I shot back, feeling 3 years of suppressed anger finally rising to the surface. How dare you come into my home and treat me like I'm worthless? How dare you tell your son that I need to be starved into behaving? How dare you suggest that hunger is an appropriate way to control another human being? Gregory held up his hands. Everyone just calm down. Clara, this money, we're married. Community property means half of it is mine anyway. No, I said firmly. We live in a state that recognizes prenuptial agreements, and ours was very clear. Separate property remains separate. But even if it didn't, Gregory, I invested money I earned before we were married. I made that investment through an LLC I established with my own funds. Thomas made sure everything was reviewed by a lawyer. The money is mine. Then you owe me, Gregory insisted, his voice desperate now. I'm your husband. You used information from my business discussions. I used publicly available information, I repeated. But you want to talk about what people owe each other? Let's talk about that. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a small notebook I'd hidden behind a row of decorating magazines. Gregory and Diane watched me with identical expressions of confusion and growing dread. For the past 6 months, since I started realizing how bad things had gotten, I've been keeping records, I said, flipping through the pages. Just little notes at first. But then I realized I needed to be more thorough. Records of what? Gregory asked, though his voice suggested he didn't really want to know the answer. Of everything, I said simply. Every conversation where you belittled me. Every time you made a financial decision that affected both of us without consulting me. Every instance where your mother made a cruel comment and you said nothing to defend me. I began reading, my voice steady. September 15th. Gregory told his business partner on speakerphone that he keeps me around because I'm pretty and I don't argue much, unlike his last girlfriend who had too many opinions. When I asked him later if he really felt that way, he said I was being too sensitive and that men talk differently in business contexts. Gregory's face reddened. That was taken out of context. I was joking with... September 22nd, I continued. Diane told me that I'd gotten fat and lazy since quitting my job. She said Gregory deserved a wife who took better care of herself. When I mentioned this to Gregory, he suggested maybe I should start going to the gym more. You're twisting things, Diane hissed. I was trying to help you. Women need to maintain their appearance for their husbands. October 3rd, I read on. Gregory cancelled the pottery class I'd signed up for without asking me. He said it was a waste of money and I should focus on more important things, like redecorating the guest bathroom. When I said I'd paid for the class with my personal allowance, he said my allowance comes from him, so every dollar I spend is his decision. The notebook was full of entries like this. 3 months of careful documentation, each incident dated and detailed. Gregory's face grew darker with each entry I read, but not with shame, with anger at being caught. You were documenting our marriage like some kind of spy, he accused. That's insane, Clara. Normal wives don't do that. Normal husbands don't threaten to starve their wives into obedience, I countered. But I have more than just my notebook. I pulled out my phone and began scrolling through screenshots. 2 weeks ago, I accessed your mother's phone when she left it unlocked on the kitchen counter. I found her text messages with her friend Margaret quite revealing. Diane's face went white. You had no right... Listen to this, I said, reading from the screenshot. Diane to Margaret. I'm so close to getting Gregory to leave her. Once he realizes how useless she is, he'll see that the Patterson girl would be a much better match. Her father's connections could triple Gregory's business. Margaret responds, How are you managing it? Diane replies, Little comments here and there, making him see how she questions his authority, how she doesn't contribute anything real. Men are easy to manipulate when you wound their pride. I looked up at Diane. You've been systematically trying to destroy my marriage so your son could marry someone whose family would be more useful to him. This wasn't about Gregory's happiness or even about me being a good wife. This was about business connections and social climbing. Diane's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Gregory turned to look at his mother, something shifting in his expression. Mom, is that true? I was looking out for your best interests, Diane said quickly. You could do so much better than... Better than what? I interrupted. Better than a woman who loved your son, who gave up her career for him, who made his home comfortable and his life easier. Or better than someone without the right last name and the right connections. Gregory stood up, pacing now, running his hands through his hair. This is insane. All of this. Clara, you can't just... You're my wife. We're supposed to be a team. A team? I felt bitter laughter bubble up. Gregory, you cancelled all my credit cards and told me I'd have to beg you for tampon money. Your mother said hunger would make me behave. Does that sound like a team to you? I was angry, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. You questioned me in front of... I asked a simple question about a business investment, I said, in private, at our own dinner table, and you responded by trying to take away my ability to feed myself or take care of basic needs. That's not anger, Gregory, that's abuse. The word hung in the air between us. Gregory flinched like I'd slapped him. I never hit you, he said defensively. There are many ways to hurt someone without raising a hand, I replied quietly. Taking away someone's financial independence, isolating them from friends and career, making them feel worthless and dependent. Those are all forms of control, and control is abuse. Diane stood up, grabbing her purse. I don't have to listen to this nonsense. Gregory, are you going to let her speak to me this way? Actually, Diane, you do have to listen, I said. Because here's what's going to happen. I've paid for 3 months at the Riverside Extended Stay Hotel. It's a nice place, comfortable, with a kitchenette and weekly housekeeping. Your things are already packed. I had a service come this morning while you were at your hair appointment. You can't throw me out. Diane's voice rose to a shriek. Gregory, tell her. But Gregory was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. You packed her things? I did, I confirmed. The movers will be here in an hour to load everything into a truck. You're leaving today, Diane. You've done enough damage to this marriage, and I won't allow you to do any more. Gregory! Diane turned to her son, desperate now. You're going to let this nobody throw your mother out onto the street? She's not throwing you onto the street, I said calmly. I'm providing you with 3 months of comfortable accommodation, fully paid. What you do after that is your own business, but you will not live in this house anymore. Gregory sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. I don't understand how everything got so twisted. It got twisted because you let it, I said, not unkindly. You let your mother poison your mind against me. You let her convince you that respecting your wife was somehow weak. You stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as something you owned. And the money? He asked quietly. The $2 million? It's mine, I said firmly. But here's what I'm willing to do. I'll invest some of it into an account for our future, if we have a future. But only if things change, Gregory. Real change. Not promises that last a week. What kind of change? Counseling, I said. Real couples therapy with someone who specializes in financial abuse and control dynamics. Your mother moves out and stays out. I restart my career. Maybe consulting work from home to start, but I'm going back to work. And most importantly, you treat me like an equal partner, not like property you can control by controlling the money. And if I don't agree? His voice was barely audible. Then I use my $2 million to hire the best divorce attorney in the state, I said. And according to our prenuptial agreement, I walk away with everything I brought in, plus everything I earned separately. You keep your business, we go our separate ways. Diane made a sound of outrage, but Gregory held up his hand to silence her. I need time to think, he said. You have until your mother's moving truck leaves, I replied. 1 hour. The moving truck arrived exactly on time. I watched from the living room window as 2 men in uniform shirts began loading Diane's belongings, her expensive luggage, her collection of decorative pillows, the antique mirror she'd insisted on hanging in the guest room. Each item that left the house felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders. Diane stood in the foyer, her face a mask of controlled fury. She'd tried arguing for the full hour, alternating between threats and tears, but I'd remained firm. Gregory had retreated to his study, and I could hear him pacing, the floorboards creaking with each heavy step. "You'll regret this," Diane said as the movers took the last of her boxes. "He'll come to his senses and realize what you really are, a gold digger who manipulated her way into money that doesn't belong to her." "Goodbye, Diane," I said simply, holding the door open. She grabbed her purse and walked out without another word, her heels clicking sharply against the stone walkway. I watched the truck pull away, followed by her car, and then closed the door. The house fell into profound silence. I found Gregory in his study, sitting at his desk with papers spread out in front of him, though I could tell he hadn't been reading them. He looked up when I entered, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. "She's gone," I said. He nodded slowly. "I heard." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Did I really become that person, the one you described?" I sat down in the chair across from his desk, the same chair where I used to sit when we'd talk about his day, back when he still valued my input. "Not all at once," I said honestly. "It was gradual, small things that built up over time." "When did it start?" His voice was raw. "When did I stop treating you like a partner?" I thought about it carefully. "Probably around the time you started believing your mother's comments. She'd say something critical about me, and instead of defending me, you'd think about whether she might be right. Then you'd look for evidence to confirm what she'd suggested. It's called confirmation bias. Once you're looking for problems, you'll find them, even if they're not really there." Gregory leaned back in his chair. "I thought I was protecting my business. My father built that company from nothing, and when he died, everyone expected me to fail. I was so focused on proving them wrong, on being successful, that He trailed off. "That you needed someone beneath you to prove you were above them," I finished. "Having a wife who needed you, who couldn't survive without you, made you feel powerful in a way business success didn't." He flinched but didn't deny it. "What you said earlier, about abuse, I meant it," I said. "Maybe you didn't see it that way, but financial control is abuse. Isolation is abuse. Using someone's dependence on you as a weapon is abuse." "I'm sorry." His voice broke. "God, Clara, I'm so sorry. You gave up everything for me and I treated you like you were worthless." "You did," I agreed, and I didn't soften it. He needed to hear it plainly. "But what matters now is what you do next." "The counselling," he said. "You really want to try?" "I want to know if the man I married is still in there somewhere," I said. "The one who asked about my work, who seemed proud of my intelligence, who made me laugh. If he is, then maybe we can rebuild. If he's gone, replaced by the man who laughed while telling me I'd have to beg for tampon money, then there's nothing left to save." Gregory stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the same view I'd stared at earlier. "I called Dr. Patricia Reeves while you were dealing with the movers. She's a therapist who specializes in marriage counseling. She has an opening tomorrow afternoon." "You called already?" I was surprised. "I was terrified you'd leave if I waited," he admitted. "I've been sitting here for the past hour thinking about what my life would look like without you and Clara. It's empty. The house, the business, all of it feels hollow without you in it." "That's a start," I said, "but words are easy, Gregory. Action is what matters." "I know." He turned to face me. "The credit cards. I've already called the bank to reactivate them, and I'm adding you as a full joint owner on the main household account, not just an authorized user. Equal access, equal control." I nodded. "And my career?" "Whatever you want to do, I'll support it," he said quickly. "If you want to go back to Rodriguez and Associates, if you want to start your own consulting firm, if you want to just take some time to figure out what you want, whatever it is, I mean it. No more trying to keep you small." "I've already talked to Thomas," I said. "He has clients who need financial consulting but don't require full-time staff. I can work from home, set my own hours, rebuild my professional reputation gradually." Gregory managed a small smile. "You had it all planned out." "I had to," I said. "I couldn't let myself depend on your decision. I needed to know I'd be okay either way." He walked over and knelt down beside my chair, taking my hand carefully like he was afraid I might pull away. "I don't know if I deserve another chance, but if you're willing to give me one, I swear I'll spend every day proving that I can be the husband you deserved from the beginning." I looked down at our joined hands, his larger one enveloping mine. 3 years ago, this touch had made me feel safe. Then it had made me feel trapped. Now, I wasn't sure what it made me feel, but I was willing to find out. "One day at a time," I said. "We go to counseling. We work on communication. You treat me as an equal, and I promise to speak up when something bothers me, instead of letting resentment build. We both change, or this doesn't work. One day at a time, he agreed. The next morning, I had coffee with Thomas at a small cafe downtown. He'd been the one to help me establish Morrison Holdings, to review all the legal documents, to make sure everything was done properly. Now he slid a folder across the table to me. 3 potential clients, he said. Small businesses that need quarterly financial reviews and investment advice. Nothing too demanding. Good starter projects to get you back in the game. I opened the folder, scanning the information, and felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Excitement about work. These look perfect. How's Gregory handling all of this? Thomas asked carefully. He's trying, I said. We have our first counselling session this afternoon. I don't know if the marriage will survive, but at least now it has a chance. And more importantly, I know I'll survive either way. Thomas smiled. There's the Clara I remember, the one who walked into my office 7 years ago and told me she was going to be the best accountant I'd ever hired. I was cocky back then, I said with a laugh. You were confident? He corrected. There's a difference. And you're still that person, Clara. You just forgot for a while. I thought about everything that had happened. The humiliation of yesterday morning, the revelation of the money, the confrontation with Diane and Gregory. I thought about the fear and uncertainty, but also about the strength I'd found buried beneath 3 years of making myself small. I won't forget again, I said. That evening, Gregory and I sat in Dr. Reeves's office, nervous and unsure. The counsellor was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanour. Tell me, she said, looking at both of us. Why are you here? Gregory and I exchanged glances. Then together we began to talk. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no magical moment where everything was fixed, no dramatic reconciliation where all the pain disappeared. Instead, there was just the difficult, messy work of 2 people trying to figure out if they could build something new from the broken pieces of what they'd had. Some days were harder than others. Sometimes Gregory slipped back into old patterns and I had to remind him. Sometimes I withdrew instead of communicating and he had to draw me out. But slowly, week by week, session by session, we started to find our way. 3 months later, I signed my first contract with a new client, a small tech startup that needed help structuring their financial growth plan. I worked from the home office Gregory had helped me set up, the space that had once been a storage room now transformed into my professional domain. 6 months later, Diane called asking if she could visit. Gregory told her no, not until she apologized to me directly and meant it. She hung up. We didn't hear from her again for a while, and that was okay. A year later, I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror and saw someone I recognized. Not the girl I'd been before marriage, and not the diminished woman I'd become during it, but someone new. Someone stronger, wiser, more careful with her trust, but also more certain of her worth. I heard Gregory making breakfast downstairs and I smiled. We weren't perfect, and maybe we never would be. But we were partners now, real ones, and that was enough. I'd learned the most important lesson. You can't build a life on someone else's terms. You have to value yourself first, protect yourself first, believe in yourself first. Everything else, love, marriage, partnership, could only be built on that foundation. And I'd never forget that again.